Hey everyone, we are live again. Welcome to our next and this YouTube live. I enjoyed doing the last couple, so here we are. Uh, this is slightly bigger than a mini episode, but this is titled WTF Does Fix the Product Mean? Our 6-point checklist to assess your app's readiness for paid user acquisition. Now, when we talk to people about advice that they find unhelpful or frustrating, something that often comes up is that they read the advice about, oh, you should fix the product, or you should build an amazing product before you do user acquisition, or have a strong product before you do user acquisition, which makes sense, except, if you pardon my French, WTF does that even mean? So today, we're going to break down what we mean by have a strong product. And this is from our own experience from talking to many relatively early stage apps that are trying to decide whether to spend on mobile user acquisition or not. We typically have a 6-point checklist of key metrics that you can review and benchmark against your category or genre to assess if your product is strong enough for you to consider doing paid UA. Right? So the next time you see advice that says have a strong product, this is a checklist you can come back to evaluate what what product strength is and what it can look like, and whether that means you're ready for paid user acquisition or not. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Number one on our 6-point checklist is how strong is our activation rate? This is typically the earliest post-install metric. You want to know and understand if people are continuing to use the product after they install, after they download. Are users actually seeing enough value to go in and explore and check out, or did they just download and just get away from it, right? So you want to understand your activation rate, and the key metrics you want to be tracking or looking for are registration completion. Are users registering, volunteering their information, and investing some amount of time and their effort? That's a key metric you can track. FATUI completion, that is first time user experience completion. Are users taking the time to complete the first time user experience, which could be a tutorial for games or a guided walkthrough for a lot of other apps, right? So are users completing that? What percentage of users are completing it? And if you have a subscription app, you could be tracking free trial percentage, which is are users coming in and are users coming in and starting a first session, or are users subscribing for a free trial and getting started? So that's number one, activation rate. Number two, are we seeing strong engagement for organic traffic? This is particularly important if you aren't monetizing or if you aren't yet feature complete, so you cannot evaluate monetization or LTV. In this case, early engagement for organic traffic can often act as a proxy for subsequent monetization. If users are sufficiently engaged, you know they're going to be monetizable down the line. Now, what does engagement mean? Right? It's again one of those terms that tends to be not very well defined. So the three metrics we recommend looking at under engagement are A, session length, which is how long does each session last? Important because you don't want users to just skim and go away. You want them to be deeply engaged. The second metric is session frequency. How often in a day do users access this app? This is a slightly different dimension of user retention, except that it measures intraday retention, if you want to look at it that way. And then the third one is session time. How much time do users spend in the app per day, right? And typically you want to benchmark these and look at these versus your genre or the category you are in. For a casual app that we evaluated recently, we looked at session length of 6 minutes, session frequency of 6 per day, session time of 30 minutes a day, right? And this was a very strong app in its category. Again, you want to look at these metrics for your app. Number three, are we hitting retention benchmarks for organic traffic? Again, this is a different dimension of the engagement metric. Specifically, we talked about the session frequency. This retention metric is crucial because it lets you understand if users resonate with the product over a period of time, be it weeks, days, or months. So you want to look at the natural usage frequency and understand what sort of retention metric makes the most sense for you. Uh, for instance, for casual games that we work with, the benchmarks we typically look at are D1, D7, D30. For subscription apps, you could look at monthly retention numbers. Uh, whatever you look at, whatever your relevant metric is, you want to make sure you track your retention numbers, both short term and medium term. Understanding that you may not have super long term retention metrics, right? And short term could be D1, D7, medium term could be D30 if possible. Same thing with a weekly with the W1 or W4 retention, right? Number four on our checklist. Are we hitting monetization benchmarks for organic traffic? Of course, this is applicable if you are monetizing. And if you are, it's helpful to ask how well you are monetizing. How likely is it that you'll make your money back if you chose to spend on paid UA? Typically, you look at ARPU or up-down numbers for your genre, and ideally, you see if you can calculate a D7 or D30 ARPU to understand what your eventual longer-term LTV could be. And once you understand your D7 or D30 ARPU, you could also look at your genre CPIs and understand if this is something that could potentially make for strong unit economics for yourself. Number five on our checklist. Are we seeing strong ratings and reviews? Self-explanatory. Are users taking the trouble to actually rate you and rate you well, right? Typically, you want to be at least 4 plus on your ratings and reviews for your organic traffic because you want to know if users like enough of your product, and at the very least, you want them to say it's not terrible. Number six on our checklist. Are we generally free from bugs and tech issues? This, again, is something that can be objectively quantified. Uh, some crashes and ANRs are unavoidable, but if you had to look at one benchmark, it would just be crash rate. Ideally, you would want crash rates to be at most at 1%. That said, there certainly are many metrics that Google particularly surfaces, and Google's particularly diligent about showing when you aren't meeting these benchmarks. Google actually calls this bad behaviors. You can check out one of our other YouTube live videos. I believe it's called Whelp. Our revenues dropped 75%. We talk much more about Google's bad behavior thresholds and how that they can impact organics, right? But in this case, you want to understand if you are relatively free from bugs and tech issues, so that you know and assess if your product is ready for paid user acquisition, right? So these are the six questions we like to ask. These typically are the lowest hanging fruit to help you assess if your product is strong enough for, at the very least, testing out paid UA. If any of these aren't where you like to be, it's very much worth it to go back to the drawing board to improve upon these metrics before you are ready to test paid user acquisition. With that, we come to an end of this particular episode. I hope this was helpful and instructive. If you liked it or enjoyed it, please leave a review or a rating right here. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel right here. Uh, Check out our podcast, Mobile User Acquisition Show, on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever else you may get your podcast fix. With that, I will sign off for the day. Thank you.